The primary tool used to keep yourself in sync with the flow and layout of your projects is the timeline. It represents the overall direction and time location of the events in your song and when they come in and out. It also offers various time-based formats to display the information. This allows you to always keep a close eye on the arrangements of your events, no matter what time format you need to work in. Let's start off by first getting to know the timeline and where it's located. The timeline is located at the top of every project arrangement window. It's a dynamic timeline in the sense that it will change the resolution of the time displayed based on how far you zoom in or out of the project. You'll also notice that the grid layout in the arrangement window corresponds with the timeline format. Several other functions are provided for you to work in conjunction with the timeline. These are located above the timeline in the project window toolbar. The first of these is the overview bar, which gives you a high-level view of your entire project. Next, you have the snap and grid functions, both very powerful features, and markers, which allow you to quickly recall specific locations within the timeline. We'll cover all of these in more detail next. Starting with the actual timeline, the first option is the ability to change the time format displayed. Simply right-click or control-click on the timeline, and a list of available time formats will appear. This offers you the flexibility of changing your method of arrangement within the same project. One moment, you may need to sequence some MIDI instruments using bars and beats, and in the next moment, you may find yourself needing to place a sound effect directly on cue to a video track. No matter what the need is, you can do it all within the same project. You also have several main functions for setting current cycle ranges. You can click and drag the left or right locator points wherever you need to create your cycle range. If you like, you can also draw on an entirely new range by moving the mouse to the very top of the timeline, and the Draw tool will appear. If you want to keep the size of the range you currently have, but need to move it to another place in the timeline, then placing your mouse at the top of the current range gives you the hand tool, allowing you to drag the entire range to a new location. The overview bar, located above the timeline, can be used to quickly navigate to other areas of the timeline that may not be immediately visible to you if you're zoomed in very close during editing. By clicking in the overview bar and rescaling the highlighted area, the timeline will zoom in or out accordingly. Relocating can also be done with markers. Markers are very simple ways to mark a specific point in the timeline that you can then jump to at the click of a button. If you want to see your markers, then you can create a marker track and you'll get a visual marker cue for each marker point. To add a marker, you just locate the playback cursor in the timeline to the point where you need the marker, and then press the Help key on your keyboard. Each time you hit the Help key, a new marker is created. To jump back to the marker, you simply click on the marker location button, or press the associated number key on your numeric keypad. Earlier we mentioned the snap and grid functions. These are both very important for working in the timeline. First, the snap function allows you to guide your ability to move events based on the current timeline format displayed. Then, based on the format you choose, you are given further sub-options within the selected format. For example, if you need to move some events around but you want to keep it in time with the bars and beats, you'll turn on snap and choose bars as the grid type. Then you'll be able to keep your movements in line with the bars and beats grid. If you choose seconds as your format, then you could keep your movements in line with the seconds grid. This is one of the most important tools within Nuendo for editing and making changes to your arrangements and events. It's also important to remember that the snap function affects cutting, pasting, resizing, splitting, and other common editing tasks. To further enhance the snap option, you have several other modes you can use. For example, choosing grid only snaps to the visual grid in the arrangement layout. If you choose events plus grid plus cursor, then your movements will snap to either the grid, an event that you come close to, or the actual playback cursor's position. This offers you a nice variety of ways to accurately place your events when you're editing based on the timeline. Okay, let's take a look over a few tips that can help you work effectively and efficiently within the timeline. Sometimes you may find that the audio material within an event doesn't necessarily fit the current snap grid. You can fix this by setting an individual snap point within an event. To do this, you'll highlight the event first. Then place the cursor exactly on the spot where you want to create the new snap point. You finish by choosing the Snap Point to Cursor option from the audio menu. Now the event will snap to the newly set snap point. One of my favorite features is the Set Locators to Event command. This is a wonderful tool when you find yourself constantly wanting to cycle or loop over a specific event while you're performing some in-depth editing or changes. To use this command, you simply highlight the event or events that you want to cycle over. Then press the P key on your keyboard, and Nuendo will automatically set the left and right locators to cycle over those highlighted events. By doing this, you'll see that it makes it very easy to quickly move your cycle ranges around even the largest projects. If that's not enough, you can even create cycle markers. These work the same way as the regular markers do, but instead of a single position in the timeline, they create completely new cycle range markers, which you can then recall at any time. Now here's the real kicker. Let's say you are working on a movie score, and you have to sequence some drum beats that need to start exactly at a certain position in the timecode. The easiest way to do this would be to have a second timeline that shows you bars and beats, and be able to view this in relation to a timecode-based timeline and see where it matches up, right? Well, Nuendo can do just that. It allows you to create multiple timelines within the same project. These are called ruler tracks, and you simply add them to your project like you would any other track. Once a ruler track is inserted, you can choose its own individual timeline format and then move it anywhere in the track list you like. If you need it directly below the original timeline, you can move it there as well. So you can see how important the timeline is for keeping an eye on how your projects are going to progress over time. The timeline is essential to the arrangement and editing process. It gives you various ways in which you can work with all the major time formats used in either music, post, or broadcast.